think this is the first time I've done something like this video on my channel. Today I'm actually going to be harkening back to the very first video I ever put out on the Mass the Ghost channel, which was all about whether or not you can consider art a real job. I did rewatch that old video, and wow, has a lot changed since then. And in my first video on this subject, I was mostly going about it with the perception of someone who was planning on earning an income from my art, but I had not yet done so. Nowadays, a vast majority of my personal money actually comes from the art that I produce, so I kind of have this fresh outlook on the subject, and I wanted to share anything since that video was made that I still agree with, and a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily agree with anymore. So coming right out the gate on if art is a real job or not. Honestly, it depends on whether or not you're making an income from it. I know that this statement is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but I don't think this is an opinion. I think it's an absolute fact that in order for something to actually be a job, you have to be making money from it. There's always great debate over how much of an income you should be making from any particular career, but honestly, I don't really care. I don't care whether you're making $12 a month or $12,000 a month off of your art. If you're making an income off of it and that income is going back into that business and paying your bills and stuff, it's a job. That's how it is. Unfortunately, the part of this that's going to ruffle feathers is that in order to make art your job, you have to make it a hobby first most of the time, unless you happen to get picked up by a company that does things like graphic design or something and you have a job right out the gate. And what I was talking about back then, this is one of the things I now disagree with. Back when that first video was published on YouTube, I had not, I believe, finished even our first comic book yet, which means that we had made exactly $0 off of our art. We'd spent a lot on it. We'd spent a lot for the supplies needed to make our art, but we had not yet brought in any kind of income. We had created a business LLC, however, and I'll explain why we did that in a minute. But because we were planning to make money off of our art, but we hadn't yet, back then I considered it a job just because I was gonna be making money from it. But nowadays, I would not consider it a job. I'd consider it a hobby because although our ambitions were great at the time, we weren't making anything from it. I mean, it could easily have died. Let's take a singer, for example. Say that you really want to become a professional singer. You have worked hard, you've gotten a degree in like music theory and stuff, you have studied under some amazing people, you've perfected your technique, and your main goal is to become part of a band right now in your city and get at least well known in your city. Even if you don't make it nationally, you'll be happy enough being pretty big in the city that you live in. You can put out like 6 TikToks a day, 2 YouTube videos, upload like 3 songs a week to SoundCloud. You can be working your tail off on your art. You can be doing everything you can to promote your music. It's still a hobby. Even though you're working really hard, even though you are producing a lot, it is a hobby until you get big enough to pay for it. And unfortunately, in the arts, most of the time, you have to pay a lot of money before you start getting paid for what you produce. Now we're going to round back to the whole we got an LLC before we started making any money. So predominantly the art that my partner and I create is graphic design, graphic novel series, and art prints. And you can technically make art your career on just the internet. You can have just like an e-commerce and make 100% of your income from that. However, that is extremely hard. It's not 2007 anymore, unfortunately. It's not as easy to be seen or picked up by somebody who is going to love what you create unless you happened to start way back when everything was beginning, because the internet is extremely oversaturated now in people who fit into various arts categories, and it's hard to be seen. This is part of why if you want everything to be on the internet for your business, you're going to have to pay money in. You are not going to be seen by a wide enough audience to make a decent living wage from what you do until you start doing things like paying for marketing, paying either a company to market you or paying for like ads on Facebook, ads on Instagram, ads on TikTok. So to a certain degree, most people who want art to actually be their real job are gonna have to put the work into doing things in person too, and then redirecting those in-person sales to your social media and your website so that they can hopefully make further purchases afterwards or support you in any way that they can afterwards. This is why we got our LLC. We knew that if we just started hosting our comic books online, even if it was someplace like Webtoons, even places like that are very saturated. We needed to get our name out there first. We needed to create some kind of fan base before we did things online. And once again, you don't have to do it in this order. You could end up very lucky, or you could end up marketing yourself well enough online that you do perfectly well there. We've just found, for us personally, we had faster growth by doing things in person as well. So we found a pretty sizable convention in our general vicinity. It's actually like 3 or 4 hours away from where we live, but it was very big. It has been very big for a long time now. I've even done some vlogs from it on this channel before a little while back, and we chose that one because we knew it gets a lot of guests. My partner had attended it as just a ticket holder a few different times in the past, and she was like, yeah, this one gets a ton of people, and they actually do walk around Artist Alley and the dealer's room. They don't just get their autograph and leave. They do tend to mooch around. So I was like, okay, I'm in. Every convention that we've attended as artists, no matter how gigantic or how tiny, doesn't matter if there's only 50 artist tables and the tables are $5 a pop versus a convention that gets 25,000 people in a weekend and the tables are $300. Every one of them have one thing in common, and that's the fact that we were not allowed to buy a table in Artist Alley unless we had a tax ID. You need a tax ID because technically speaking, you are a worker under that convention for that weekend. They make money off of the tables that we buy. Actually, a large amount of the money that conventions bring in to get the celebrity guests at the next one is from the dealers' tables and the Artist Alley tables. They've even admitted that to us a few times. And so they have to declare that money they've made on their taxes. In order to do that, they need proof just in case anything goes awry, so they need you to have a tax ID number. Otherwise, you're basically illegally working there. Now, the cool thing about it is that you are a legitimate business once you have that, which feels pretty good. The downside is we have both done our own taxes for the business privately, and we've had a professional look over them before. And what the professional told us is that because we're a business in the eyes of the United States government, every single year when we file taxes for our business, we have to show proof that we made more money than we spent on the business, which is difficult because if you have a bad year, like during COVID or something, when you don't have any conventions, we had to do a lot of online conventions. We had to really hustle with our e-commerce and make sure that people were still buying things from us and interested in us as a business, because I believe, if I remember correctly, it's a 3 strikes you're out situation. You've got a few different chances to end up in kind of like a money deficit before the United States government closes you down and says you are no longer a legitimate business. And this is something that does come at a cost. You do have to hustle a lot, whether you're doing things online or in person. There's a lot of hustle. You have to make sure that a large amount of your time is dedicated to making sure that you produce the things that people want to buy. You have to have a really good relationship with your fans. We have a little less of an online presence and more of an in-person presence, and that's fine. That's another thing that I've noticed with art that people don't seem to understand. I think that YouTube brain and Instagram brain happens a lot. It's okay if you don't have a huge social media presence as long as you're still making enough money from people in person. It's okay. Social media numbers are not everything. They don't determine whether or not you're a real business. The money you're bringing in does. And we've had problems before in the past with people in our lives who don't understand that. They either equate it to like hobbies that they have, or they're like, well, you can afford to just take a little break right now. But it's like, no, we really can't, especially since our main seller is our books. We have to finish entire books in like a 4-month period. We have to have them fully illustrated, colored, shaded, finalized. They have to process at the facility that prints them. They have to get printed. They have to get to us. That is a lot of steps. It's very important and it's very time consuming. And we do still make sure that we have a relationship with the people around us and everything, but a lot of people don't understand that it is no longer a hobby. We can't take a break. We can't just go and do something at the drop of a hat if we're in the middle of finishing something that someone is paying us to do, because that is our job. I see it the same way as if we're told you have until, the 10th of the month to finish your book, and someone says, oh, but I really miss you and I just want you to just go have, lunch with me. Just go out for like a few hours. Just take one day off. It's the same thing as just leaving work, not telling your boss that you're cutting early, not doing anything to make sure that your shift is covered, just taking off and saying, well, I've been working hard at my 9 to 5 lately, so I've just decided I get the day off today. It's just wildly unprofessional. People are paying us for a service and we need to provide them with that service. So to wrap all of this up, I no longer believe that just because you're producing a lot of content at a time that makes that content your job. I think it's a hobby until you're actually making money off of it. And some people will get to that point and some people won't. And some people will make a lot of money and some people only make a little money. But as long as you are making enough money that you are considered, an actual business with actual profits coming in, I would definitely consider art a real job. There are plenty of people out there who pay all of their bills just off of the money they get from their art. It can be done. It's going to take a lot of hustle and a lot of patience and a lot of work, but don't give up. I always go back to the best professor I ever had in my life. I had him so many times because he was just the best creative writing dude. He had been published numerous times. And in our advanced creative writing class, there were people who were getting frustrated because they hadn't been published yet. And he said, listen, there's only one way in art that you're going to fail. And that's when you suddenly decide that you're not gonna produce art anymore. The second you decide it's too hard and you don't want to do it anymore, that's when you fail. It takes different people, different amounts of time to get to the point that my partner and I are at right now. It takes a very, very long time, and you need to be kind to yourself. And the last thing I want to add to this is, I know I've talked a lot about hustle and everything, but you also need to make sure that when your art is still your hobby and you are not yet being paid for it, make sure you're not neglecting every other aspect in your life to produce that content. You need to make sure that the people in your life are still feeling loved and seen and accepted, and that you're still there for them when you need them. You need to make sure you are actually taking a break here and there and spending time with the people that you love and doing the other things in your life that you're passionate about, because if all you're doing is working on just your art and nothing else, just the one thing that you're hoping will end up taking off as your artistic career one day, you may love it now and you may be like, oh, even the hustle culture, it's like giving me a rush. I love every minute of this. Eventually, I promise you, you're going to hit burnout. Eventually, it's going to happen. You're going to hit a point where for like 3 months, you don't want to produce anything because the idea of it isn't fun anymore, because it's not what you're passionate about anymore. It's just another job. Before I wrap up this section of the video, I just wanted to elaborate on that last thought that I mentioned, because I already know there's going to be a lot of you in the comments section or just watching the video rolling your eyes and saying that's never going to be me, because trust me, I know as someone who's been producing art for a very long time, everyone always says that'll never be me, I'm never going to hit burnout, I'm always going to adore what I do, and you couldn't keep me from creating content. Everyone says it until they suddenly hit burnout. No one plans for burnout. No one just goes into a project thinking, I'm going to get burned out from this and not want to do it anymore. Hooray! But think of your favorite large-scale content creators. Think of artists on Instagram who have like 3 million followers. Think of YouTubers with like 20 million followers. Every single one of them at some point in time has hit burnout. And there's a combination of factors that can go into this. One of them is what I just mentioned, which is just that the hustle reaches a point where your body literally cannot keep up with it anymore. It doesn't matter if you're technically sleeping the proper amount of hours per night. If you're sleeping on a wonky schedule where one night you go to sleep at 4 a.m., another night you go to sleep at midnight, another one you go to sleep at like 8 o'clock at night, that's still bad for you. You also don't eat as well, generally speaking, when all you're doing is pumping out content, because you need to make sure that you're eating something that's really quick. You can't sit there spending an hour making dinner because you need to create, you need to hustle, hurry. So your body starts to break down, and whether your mind wants you to keep going or not, if your body doesn't think it can handle what you're throwing at anymore, it's gonna force you to stop. Another reason a lot of people hit burnout, even though everyone thinks that it will never happen to them, is things like once you get to that point where you have loads and loads of followers, it will get to you. You're going to get a lot of hate comments, and even if the hate comments don't really bother you, you're going to have certain expectations that your audience expects you to keep. And I know it's tempting to say, well, screw them, it's my platform, I'm going to create what I want to create, and they can just come along for the ride or not. But you're going to hit a point where if you gain enough of a following online, to a certain extent, you have to do what that audience wants you to do, because if you don't, they feel like you don't care about them and they're all going to bolt and you're going to be back at square one. We've all seen it happen with certain creators. Your platform is given to you by your audience and they can just as easily take it away from you. So I just wanted to quickly pop in and elaborate a little bit more on that last thought, and now we're going to get right back into the video. Please never let yourself get to a point where your art is literally all that you care about. And you may not think that it is, but it's good to sometimes ask the people around you. Check in on your friends, check in on your family. Make sure they don't feel neglected. Ask them if you've been spending a little too much time on what you're working on, that current project or not, because you're not always going to see it the same way that they do. But that's all I've got for this one. I hope all of you enjoyed it, and as always, do something that makes you happy today as long as you're not hurting anyone else, and I'll see all of you again soon.